So this is a video I'm going to show of a movie called I think it's Apollo 13, and they had an incident up in a space shuttle that you will see has a high level of ambiguity. It's about a 3 minute clip, and I think it's a pretty good clip. So what do you guys think is going on? I mean, do they know what the problem is? You can't really tell. I mean, they are essentially diagnosing, troubleshooting. What did you do? What led to what? They're trying to use rationale, but the reality is they don't know what's happening, and they're suffering from something called ambiguity. And when you look at the definition of ambiguity, I'll pull it back up in a second. It says it's being able to accept and profit from vague, uncertain, or inconsistent information or situations. If you were to ask me, that's a vague, uncertain, or inconsistent information. These folks are in space. Some of them have been in space before, some of them haven't. They haven't been in space with that particular shuttle. They haven't been in space with that particular team. So everything is new to them. And what's happening is they're going to have to figure out, based on new information, the information that they have, how to make a decision to get this shuttle home safe. And if you know the story of Apollo 13, what they ended up doing is the people who I hope you trust in the command center. In the command center, people, I mean, you ask who's the leader? Well, it's the lead astronaut on the shuttle. Well, actually, it's the commander in the command center. Well, actually, at that time, it's the data science guy who's looking for information to solve the problem. So there's a shared leadership component happening. There's a clear hierarchy of command, but eventually those leaders are going to have to gather information and they're going to have to make a decision. And the decision they made saved the lives of everybody in that shuttle. They only had enough, I don't know what the actual problem was, but they were running out of booster thrust and they couldn't accomplish the mission that they were going to accomplish. But what they did is now they're on a mission just to get home and survive. So they took the moon's gravity somehow and figured out how to catapult the shuttle around the moon and make it back to Earth with just enough gas or fuel to thrust her back to Earth and land safely in the ocean. And everybody survived. So wow, they certainly profited in a sense from surviving based on tolerating ambiguity, not losing their cool, gathering information, making a decision, and somebody's going to have to be accountable for those decisions. And let me tell you, if you lead for a certain amount of time, one of the things that I love to say is that every good leader walks with a limp, meaning they've had an experience that has impacted them in some detrimental way. It's they made a bad decision. They did something wrong. They had somebody maliciously embezzle money from them. They've experienced certain things in their career that have scarred them in a sense. It's not a bad thing. It's just sort of a part of leadership. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to talk about power, which is a little bit more fun, and I'd love to engage you more, but I'm going to fly through this part of it. Leadership does come when you're in a position of power. There's really two types of power. There's formal power and informal power. And we talked a little bit about the motive to attain power, but the reality is the person with formal power has power. And formal power is legitimate power, coercive power, and reward power. So it's these three. Let's see if I can draw on here. Again, it's legitimate power, reward power, and coercive power. This is formal power. And it means if you have legitimate power, you have a role, you have a status, so you have a position. You have been put in a position to control resources or to control people's jobs, not jobs, but to lead people, to be accountable for whether or not that person is successful in their job. You have the power to fire them, whatever that looks like. Reward power means you have the power to give them an incentive. You can give them a promotion. You can write them a recommendation letter. In this class, I have the ability to give you an A or give you a C. So there's an element of reward power, which is one of the reasons why you're listening to me is because maybe you want to get a good grade. So that's a formal power. Coercive power is power through fear using sanctions or withholding resources. So when you talk about, we're going to talk a little bit in this class about using classical conditioning, and one of which is you can use punishment or you can use positive reinforcement. You can positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. So you could actually demote somebody. You could take away opportunities. You could threaten to fire somebody. That's a coercive power, and you could follow through on that threat. So you're coercing somebody to do something you want them to do by using your power. So these are things to acknowledge that as a leader, power, the subject of power is a real thing. And then let's talk about informal power. These are three of my favorites. Let me see if I can use a different color. I use like a different style. There we go. We have referent power, we have expert power, and we have informational power. Um, yeah, so these basically, you do not need a position in order to have these forms of power. Referent power is based on a person's charisma or likability, attracting others' loyalty. If you're friendly and kind and you do altruistic if you're altruistic, you have altruism, meaning you do things for the sake of the good of others, not for your own personal gain. And that's a part of who you are, your trait, your characteristic in life. People will like you, they'll gravitate towards you. That's a form of power. They sort of look to you for understanding the culture, understanding what to do in certain situations. Expert power stems from a person's skills and knowledge, powerful in areas of expertise. My father-in-law worked for Florida Power and Light for 40 years. He was a lineman, and he's a very hands-on, fix-it type of guy. And he really does know a lot about a lot of things, especially when it comes to caring for homes and electricity and automobiles. When I have an issue with my power in my house, to use just this example, my father-in-law is a leader and he leads me and I ask him and inquire and he is an expert in that area. So there's a level of power with that. I'm sure you can think of other examples. Your car mechanic, when your car breaks down, your car no longer gets from A to B and it's no longer a car. It's now one of your biggest problems. You take it to the mechanic. That mechanic, whether you know it or not, has power over your ability to fix your car. That's expert power. Informational power, which is big these days because you think about marketing companies and they have access to data. And with that data, they can make decisions and they can influence other people's behavior based on the information that they gathered about consumers. That's informational power. So these are all forms of informal power. So if you have a lot of information at work, if you have a lot of friends and influence, and if you have a lot of skills in a particular area, but you're not in a formal leadership role, you're still you still have power to influence other people. But impactful leaders have skills. And when we talk about leadership, we're going to draw out what these skills mean. And cognitive skills, are you smart? Are you a good strategic thinker? Are you creative? Do you have certain IQ that helps you become better at dealing with ambiguity? And then, of course, professional knowledge. One of the things that we will talk about a little bit more in depth as the class progresses is this thing called systems thinking. And systems thinking is, let's just say that you work for Amazon and you started in Amazon as a driver. And then after you started as a driver, you became a warehouse manager. And from a warehouse manager, you became a district manager. And as a district manager, you then became an executive for the region. At that particular time, you have a large amount of knowledge on how the system of Amazon works and operates. There's a lot of value there. And that value can be translated into leadership effectiveness. So, professional knowledge about your institution, about how your institution works, how your institution operates, the system in which we are involved in, the processes and procedures to get things done. Who is it that I should go to when there's no toilet paper in the bathroom or when there's a social media post that has a misspelling? Who do I call? Those things don't just, you can't just read those in the manual. That comes from long work at a particular organization. And that's very helpful for leaders to have. The ability to communicate. You can see that some people, when you listen to them, they, it almost seems like you're not just listening, that you're involved in the conversation. And that's a good thing. And then some people, when you listen to them, you feel as if you're just listening to someone say la, 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 and you can't connect with them. You can't resonate with them. And communication skills matter. When you encode a message and you deliver it to someone else, you need to look for feedback. I wait for her to give me feedback. And I'm going to pause there because it's so very important. One of the things I try to teach my students when I talk about communication, number one, if somebody is talking and you're not listening, they know you're not listening if they're self-aware because they can tell, because of hopefully they're smart enough. If they know you're not listening, I'm sorry, if they don't know you're not listening and you're clearly not listening, they're probably not a very good communicator because it takes the ability to listen to see whether or not the people you're talking to are actually hearing you, number one, or you're not self-aware, you're not socially aware, you're struggling with emotional skills. So there's a lot to communication. I'll say one other thing. If you're talking and somebody else is not listening and you know they're not listening, stop talking because it's not worth it. They're not listening to you. There's two bad things that are happening. There's noise within their communication. Number one, you're wasting your breath. You're literally talking to yourself. Number two, they need to acknowledge the fact that they're not listening. The fact that you allow them to like go off into la la land and not listen to you is almost enabling their inability to listen. Or you say, "Hey, I'm sorry. It seems like you're not listening. Are you tired or what are you thinking about?" Or maybe you ask them a question. So, communication as a leader, just that simple concept alone, if leaders are good at having that dialectic communication with other people, it makes them such a better leader. It has their ability to impact people and communicate a vision is significantly higher. And I'm sure you can see that just obviously just from your own experiences. All right, so these are self-awareness is one of the most important things. We kind of talked a little bit about that. What is it? What do I, well, who am I here with you? Well, I'm an IQ, meaning I have a cognitive ability. I have emotional things happening within my brain too. And then I have my traits, my personality traits. So these three things combined really kind of make me who I am. And we'll unpack that a little bit more in the next chapter. Leadership styles. Again, I'm giving you a brief overview of some pretty heavy subjects just so you can see a little bit why the science is important and maybe some of these things resonate with you based on my awareness of myself and my ability to do some reflection and analysis, my ability to listen to other people and to see if the communication I'm saying has an impact and to learn and grow in relationship with others. That's really what leadership is. I will eventually adopt or hopefully exude one of these styles as my baseline style. And I'm just going to read some of them quickly. I'm going to read one and I'm going to let somebody else read another so that we can go through. But one of my favorites is servant leadership. A servant leader focuses on meeting the needs of the team members, empowering and helping them to develop and perform as highly as possible. If you think about it, when you see a leader, you don't actually see them, you see through them to their team. They are there to serve their team. They're there to make their team better. It's not about them. They were brought here to serve and not to be served. That's a servant leader. I was thinking that we tomorrow would go to take our team out to lunch. Um, where would you like to go? Oh, I don't know, Claude. It's up to you. All right, cool. Well, I have three options. We have Olive Garden, we have Chili's, and we have Joe's Sandwich Shop. Which one of those is your favorite? But Chili's is my favorite. I love Chili's. We should go to Chili's. Okay, let's go to Chili's. That sounds like a good idea. When you go back to your team and you're galvanizing their ability and you let them know that we're going to go out to lunch, aren't you going to be so much more excited about the decision of going out to lunch because I allowed this democratic process of you being involved in the decision making? Do you see what the impact that could have? The process of really making decisions and leading other people to not it's not an authoritarian concept. It's hey, we have some time to take a vote or to see what other people are willing to do. And me as a leader, I'm not going to tell you that whatever I want to do, I'm ultimately going to make the decision. No, democratic means it's going to be the majority. And okay, so how about I'm going to read autocratic leadership and then I'll have someone else read transformational leadership. So autocratic leadership is pretty much the opposite. It's characterized by an individual's control over decisions with little input from group members, often leading to high levels of productivity and highly structured environments. Let me be clear. And the purpose of me saying you're going to have a default leadership style, but you also need to be contingent on the situation. So if we were in a democratic leadership style, and let's say a tornado was coming, we're all in a class, and there's a tornado that is literally a mile away. And I know we're in Florida, but let's just say we're in Oklahoma, and we hear the sirens go off, and I'm the teacher, and I say, okay, what do you guys think? Before we make a decision, let's vote on what we should do here. Should we, go into our cars and drive, or should we go down to the basement, or why don't we just stay here and keep learning? Is that a constructive thing to do at a time like that? Probably not. So a democratic style doesn't always work. Somebody wants an autocratic leadership style in a situation like that, a situation of crisis. The alarms are going off. I understand the protocol here at this college. What we're going to do is we're all going to head down to the basement. Please follow me. Boom, gone. Like that's the kind of leader I want in a situation like that. You can see the difference. Okay, transformational leadership. And somebody in the process of leading them, they had some things that they didn't know about themselves or the world. And those things that they didn't know about themselves or the world were made apparent to them at some point in your leadership journey. And all of a sudden, they realized that, wait a minute, there are bad guys out there. Or wait a minute, people are following me. Or wait a minute, I really like that thing. And because you provided them the space to transform, they became like a new person, like a caterpillar going into a cocoon transforms into a butterfly. I know it's sort of an embellishment of the transformational process, but that's what it's like to have a transformational leadership style is that you're really trying to make boys into men, girls into women. You're trying to take a person who's ready to learn to a person who's ready to serve. That's a transformational process. And leaders can do that. And it's one of the things I think if you hang around me long enough, I like this style because I truly believe in the best in people. And I want when I see potential, I want that potential to shine and I want to draw it out in people. And if you hang around me long enough, I'm going to help you set some goals. I'm going to be setting goals, and you're coming alongside of me, and we're going to go to the gym in the morning, and we're going to figure things out. And I'm going to ask you questions about some of the things that you struggle with in your life. And hopefully, after about a year and a half of hanging out with me, you look back and say, "Wow, I'm a different person." So that's a transformational leadership style. Okay, transactional leadership. This style is based on a system of rewards and punishments, focusing on achieving set goals through a clear structure and defined roles. Again, perfectly permissible. As a sales coordinator, my leader expects me to call 10 people a day. And at the end of the day, I only called 7 people. The next morning, because my leader can see how many calls I made the prior day, my leader comes to me and says, "Hello." Doesn't say, "How you doing? How was your day?" Not really there to, serve you in any way. They just simply say, "I saw that you made 7 calls yesterday. The expectation is that you make 10. What happened?" Is that bad thing that a leader does that? Well, if a leader does that every day, all the time, and never asks you how you're doing, yeah, that's a bad thing. But it's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. If you're expected to make 10 calls, you want your leader to hold you accountable, and it's a transaction. I pay you X amount of money, you make a certain amount of calls. Transaction. Get the point. Okay, next one, laissez-faire leadership. I don't want to read that one. It sounds great and it sounds permissible, but at a certain period of time, you kind of want your leader to be involved. You want your leader to give you structure, and you want your leader to help you out. And so Zappos is a company that has really kind of gone into this no leader, bossless environment, and they sort of have this laissez-faire leadership. But inevitably, their peers are actually the ones who evaluate them because so it gets very competitive. So laissez-faire leadership is a guy named Adam Smith who wrote a lot about capitalism. And so I'm just going to draw out the point about capitalism, and we can translate that into leadership. So the purpose of capitalism is to make sure we have property rights is very important, contract law because you have some enforcement of law, and then free trade, free market trade. So those three components are really, really a big deal. And the government is meant to have a laissez-faire approach to regulation. They're meant to allow the markets. The businesses are supposed to fail. Like if they can't meet market needs with this capitalistic structure, they fail. Like hey, I'm in. Just it is what it is what laissez-faire really means. Let it be. It's a French word, and let it be. If my daughter, so I'll do a parenting thing. Maybe you guys can relate. I have a 4-year-old daughter and I have a 9-year-old daughter. And sometimes they fight. When I say they fight, they're screaming at each other. And the 4-year-old, throws a toy, a pretty big toy, at the 9-year-old. And then the 9-year-old comes, and 9-year-old's like pretty big and can take care of it, comes and interrupts me while I'm talking to my wife about something. And she says, Bradley just threw this toy at me. And I take a look at her and I say, okay. I suggest you go back in the room and maybe she'll apologize to you. Obviously, that's probably not a great example. I would go in and say, "Hey, rather just the story. That's not a good idea." But sometimes I have to let it be. They have to figure it out on their own. They have to learn how to deal with one another without dad intervening. So hopefully, you can see how that would be sort of a laissez-faire leadership style. All right, so let it be. Nothing for me to do here. Appreciate the information. All right, I'm going to breeze through these other ones just for the sake of time. I appreciate some of those people that volunteered to read. Charismatic leadership relies on the charm and persuasiveness of the leader to inspire and enthuse others, other followers. Charismatic leaders were tending before a lot of the literature came out about leadership. People looked highly upon charismatic leaders just because they were charismatic. This guy Justin Trudeau could be an example of that in Canada, and he just recently stepped down. He had charisma about him. He had a good way of speaking, and but charisma is not always a good thing because sometimes charisma could create too much expectation on the leader. Everybody could be looking to their charismatic leader to make the important charismatic decision and come out with the lifesaver and kill Darth Vader at every turn. That's not that's really not what a leader is supposed to be doing all the time. So again, charisma is not always a great thing. There's certain great leaders, and Bill Gates would be one of them. I mean, I wouldn't consider Bill Gates to be necessarily charismatic, but he is certainly a good leader, and he has the ability to get things done. And he's not. I would think Mark Zuckerberg would also fit into that bucket. Not incredibly charismatic, but a pretty good leader. Debatable, but that's something to consider. Okay, so situational leadership is contingency. Leaders adapt to the style, to the competence and commitment of their followers, or the specifics of the task at hand. We'll talk more about that as we go through the chapters. Participative leadership, very similar to democratic leadership. This style encourages and values the input of team members and peers, but the leader retains the final say over decisions. So the big difference there is democratic leadership, you allow the decision to be made on a democratic process. If 10 people in a room say yes and you say no, even though you're the leader, because the democracy did what it was supposed to do, you have to go with the decision of the many, or it's not democratic leadership. It's participative leadership. You allow them to discuss and deliberate and debate, and 10 people says, yes, I want to go to Olive Garden, but you want to go to Chili's. You allow them to participate in the leadership process, but ultimately you retain the authority. That's participative leadership. So that's sort of the difference between those two. Strategic leadership, one of my favorites. I'll unpack that a little bit more as we go, but we don't necessarily have the time. Strategic leaders are very conceptually grounded. They're very good at understanding the systems thinking and the big picture. Okay, here's a fun one. Leadership's great, right? We have authority and we have control and we have resources and there's so many wonderful things. A feeling power and prestige. We have high income, respect and status, good opportunities for advancement. We're just floating on a cloud. We're leading people. This is fun. Look at me. Is that always the case? Is this always a fun thing to be a leader?
No, of course not.
there was a gentleman in the class, I forget his name. He says he works at Publix. It's a great organization. And he's, I think, moving up in his leadership. And I promise you, and I'll use just him because I remember this conversation as an example, as you grow in your leadership, you also have to grow in your capacity to lead, your capacity to deal with frustrating situations and ambiguity, and to learn how to not be too emotionally tied to the tasks. And if you're not capable of growing in your capacity to lead, you're going to get promoted too soon and you're going to get fired. You're going to get promoted to your level of incompetence. And you have to grow through that refining process. And there's a lot of frustrations to leadership. In my career, in a lot of sense, I'm grateful I'm not leading 100 people in the construction pool and landscape industry. I actually did it. I served my time. It was very difficult. It was a lot of fun. But would I go back to that position? Not right now. I mean, maybe at some point in my career, but I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I like consulting. I like having expert power, I guess you can say. I like talking to students who are eager to learn. This is much more fulfilling to me in this phase of my life than dealing with the frustrations of leadership. Some of those frustrations are too much uncompensated overtime. My wife, and maybe some of you can relate, my wife works at Baptist Homestead Hospital. She works in patient experience. She's amazing at what she does. And we have these kids. And so we're doing a lot throughout the week. And at the end of the night, it's 8 o'clock. She's done her work. I'm done my work. We lay down on the couch together and she wants to talk to me. So I listen. She's talking about Sue at work, doing this. And she tells me a story about Sue. And I'm listening. Okay. And then she wants to talk about another person at her work. And then, so for about 20 minutes, after this whole day, it's 8 o'clock at night. I'm at my house on my couch talking about people I don't know at her work. And in her mind, she's working. And sometimes she's on her email. And this is obviously, I do this stuff sometimes as well, but she's not getting compensated for that thought pattern. She cares a lot about what she does. She cares about the people at work, that she thinks about it often. And she sends emails late at night. She's on salary. She doesn't get paid for that. So, anyways, that's just an example. Too many headaches, facing a perform or perish mentality, loneliness. I'll briefly touch on this. So there's a man named Charles Lopez who had a great influence on my career as a leader at Reef Tropical. And Charles Lopez worked in human resources. And he kind of saw me when I first started growing in my leadership responsibilities. And he saw some of the things I was good at, and he saw some of the things that I wasn't so good at. And he watched me struggle through some of these frustrations. And one day he said to me, "Listen, leadership is a lonely place." And I was like, "What do you mean it's a lonely place? I got people all around me all the time." But the reality is, there's people all around me, but nobody really understands the level of responsibility and obligation that I harness on my shoulders. And it seems to be that no matter how much I communicate to, say, staff members, I can't talk about certain things with them. I can't explain to them what I know about the future of the company, or what I know about the limited amount of funds that we have for payroll next week. Or I can't get them scared, or I can't vent to them about some customer that I had a problem with. It doesn't come off well. So often, leadership at such a high capacity, there's not other people that are next to you experiencing the same things that you can speak to about these things. So that's why a lot of times leaders, they have groups or mastermind groups or ways in which to kind of talk about some of this stuff with other fellow leaders. That's really helpful. Does anybody? Yeah, it's a trade-off. There are a lot of people problems, but guess what? You get to influence people. There's too much organizational politics, but guess what? You're starting to understand organizational politics, and you're learning a little bit about how to influence people through political tactics. Pursuit of conflicting goals. You see that some goals are you want to be able to advance in your career, but unfortunately, the people around you aren't giving you enough output or performance, which is keeping you from advancing your career because they have different goals. Maybe they're just trying to manufacture products, and that can be difficult. But guess what? That's life. Being perceived as unethical, that's a tough one. Sometimes people will leaders. There's a scrutiny on leaders in a sense that whenever let's just look at Kamala Harris, JD Vance. When they're stepping into this political conversation and they are about to be either nominated to be the vice president under the Trump administration, or becoming the from the vice president to the president under the Biden administration, and as representing the Democratic Party, they were scrutinized like you wouldn't believe on second number one. And again, I use that embellished example of political leadership. That's what happens too at company level. So in this private equity company that I own a portion of, but I no longer operate, they just hired a CEO. And I was talking to one of the investor relations gentlemen about like how's the company doing, what's going on with my shares, this kind of stuff. And he mentioned that they hired the CEO. You better believe I'm like, okay, let me Google this guy and see who this guy is and see where he went to school and see what qualifies him to lead this company that I own. Like, I want to know what's up with this. I scrutinized him, and I it's bad to say, but inherently was judgmental of whether or not he was going to have the capabilities based on what I could see to lead the organization that I own. That's an important concept. And you can't help but do that as a human being is to, I mean, judging isn't always a bad thing, obviously doing it in a certain kind of way, but looking into what you can see on surface level and doing some information and having some level of biases is natural. Obviously, I'm not going to get into this whole bias and stereotyping conversation, but the reality is people are looking to you. They're looking at your attitude, they're looking at your emotions, they're looking at your traits, they're looking at your behavior, and they're determining whether or not you are fit to lead them. There you go. And that's tough. That's tough. That's a tough place to be, in that limelight. Job fatigue and burnout. Okay. That was a good one to understand. Um, I'm going to skip this one because we're actually going to go into the opposite. Leadership as a process is different than this trait model of leadership. This is actually a pretty good framework. So I'm going to expand the screen and maybe draw on it for a second. Okay, so leadership effectiveness equals combined influence of three set factors. This is pretty cool, and this aligns a lot of things. I'm a leader, and I work at Publix, and I have 5 people working on my team in the meat department because the meat department's funny. Go there, you look at the meat. Like, I don't know if this is fresh. I'm looking at this meat. What's this going on over here? And you compare the prices. Okay, so everyone's done that. What is going to make me an effective leader as the leader of these 3 people? Well, I'll tell you what's going to make you effective. The leadership characteristics, behavior, and style of the leader. It's going to matter. And we'll talk about what characteristics, behavior, and style means in the next chapter. The group member characteristics and behavior. So, how do they act? What are some of the things that if you picture frontline workers in the meat department and some of the things that they exude and their behaviors and characteristics, along with the context, the internal and external environment. So, Publix is a pretty big company. The grocery store business is becoming more competitive because of a bunch of different factors, and also, whether or not the store is clean and whether or not the store is smells bad. The meat store, is it horrible? How do they like what they do? Like there's internal factors and external factors that matter. So if a leader is really, 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 really good leader, that's only 1/3 of your ability to be successful. So no matter how good you think you are with your characteristics, behavior, and style, and your communication, you're still going to your effectiveness is still going to be um, hindered or improved on the context, the internal and external environment, and the group members on your team. So this is the fun thing about leadership is no matter how good we are, what matters most is how good our team is that we're leading. How can we as leaders use our behavior, characteristics, and style to influence our team based on the context to achieve goals? So this is meant to, and I'm drawing it out, meant to get you to see that no matter how strong and powerful you are as a leader, no matter how much you study and how well you speak, there's chances that you still won't succeed if you don't acknowledge these other factors that can help you become a better leader or could hinder you. Okay, we're going to talk about that next time. Okay, I'm going to briefly touch on followership. All right, I'm going to say a comment and let me know what you think about it. Leaders need followers more than followers need leaders. Say it one more time. Leaders need followers more than followers need leaders. What do you think about that? You agree, disagree? The followers could oust you. The followers could have a revolt or what do you call it? Like a mutiny? What, not mutiny. A uprising, a mutiny. That's what it is. And that's a problem. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, we're sitting here talking about leadership, but we need to think about what it means to be a follower. And as a follower, and in this class, I don't want you to just think about you as a leader. I want you to think about you as a follower and who you're leading, why you're allowing them to influence you. And if we understand the essence of followership and just how very important it is that your followers don't need you. Sometimes they can get the job done, or they can go work somewhere else or with somebody else, regardless of whether or not you coerce them or whatever that looks like. But as a leader, you certainly need your followers to be incentivized, to be instructive, to not have toxic work behaviors. So, understanding the study of and the empathy for followers is a key factor in becoming an effective leader. See if we can talk more about that. Key role for followers is collaboration with leaders and achieving organizational goals. The new leader, okay, this is cool. So the new leader and the led are close allies. Great leaders are made by great groups. So if you have a difficult work situation where let me see if I can use an example. Let's look at that Challenger, not the Challenger shuttle, but the Apollo 13 situation. That team of astronauts that came back from that mission, they they had good leaders and there was lots of followers involved. They are probably considered at the time some of the best astronauts on the planet because they were able to refine some of their skills and understand how to work together in a group to become better leaders. So it's kind of like who you surround yourself with matters. Like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future concept. Yes, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. If I hang out with five of the coolest people in this class, and we're hanging out for an extended period of time, you better believe that we're influencing one another. And if we're all doing the right things and pursuing the right goals, I'm going to become a better person. Now, look at the inverse of that. You take all of that time and you make it exponential with another group of people that are going in the wrong direction. Not only say this one person with a bad group and another person with a good group, and say this is a group that's led by a bad person and a group that's led by a really, really good leader who values other people. And you stay with that group for a particular time, not only are you declining, but the teams that you're competing against are actually moving in the opposite. They're getting better. So you're exponentially moving in the wrong direction as this team gets better and you're not going anywhere. So it really matters. In the modern organization, leaders and followers often switch roles. This quote says, in reality, one cannot claim that he or she is a leader or follower at all times and in all circumstances. Everything we just talked about was sort of the gist or the overview of leadership. And we talked a lot about how leadership is a relationship. It's a leader member exchange. There's followers, there's leaders, there's an exchange, it's contingent on the styles and the circumstances. That is all of that is true. But there's another thing called trait theory approach to leadership. And what it means is that there are certain things that leaders have, traits. Traits would be cognitive ability, emotional ability, and behavioral skills. Like what are the cognitive traits of a leader? What are the emotional traits of a leader? And what are the behavioral traits of a leader? That's kind of a good way to break down what traits really are. Cognitive, emotional, and behavioral. And these things done often tend to produce high performing leaders. And then the inverse is true. Certain leaders who don't have the right cognitive skills or the right emotional skills and the right behaviors, they will not perform well. Pretty straightforward, but we're going to look at what some of those things are. So without further ado, here are general personality traits of effective leaders. So personality traits is a big five personality trait, and I'm not going to go into details. This is a little bit more than the big five, but the big five is extroversion. The opposite of that is introversion. Are you introverted or are you extroverted? Another one is conscientiousness. High conscientious people are industrious and orderly. It's like a waiter coming over to your table and they're calculated with their steps. They submit assignments on time. They make sure they double check their spelling. That's conscientiousness. Agreeableness is, if I'm inherently a disagreeable person. Like I kind of like dissent. I like to argue. I like to think through things. So my wife and I have interesting conversations. An agreeable person, if I say, yo, the elephant is pink and the elephant's not pink, it's clearly gray. And an agreeable person says, yeah, I can see that, how the elephant is pink. A disagreeable person is like, no, it's not pink, it's gray. What are you thinking? What are you talking about? So I guess maybe you can see yourself as if you're more disagreeable or more agreeable. Another one, so we have extroversion, introversion, we have conscientiousness, we have agreeableness. That's something called neuroticism, which is an interesting one. It's high in emotional instability. So people with a lot of negative emotions who are sometimes emotionally unstable are considered highly neurotic. The opposite of that would be people that are more stoic, more calm, cool, collected. I'm just going through the big five. And then the last one, so you have extroversion, introversion, you have agreeableness, you have conscientiousness, you have neuroticism, and then the last one is openness to experience. People with high openness personality trait tend to have creative genes, a little bit higher of an IQ. They're intuitive thinkers. People who are low on openness are more um, they're not really interested in learning new things. They feel like, they have this, what is it called? Instead of a growth mindset, they have a limited mindset where they just don't think that there's anything new under the sun and they just don't think they have anything to learn. So that's a person who's not open. So let me just briefly, a good leader is about moderate on conscientiousness. They're moderate on agreeableness, but they're very high on trait openness. They tend to have good trait openness. And they certainly have to be high on extroversion because you need to be around other people in order to lead them. And being an introverted leaders can be effective, but it's a little bit easier when you're extroverted. And then the last one is what was it? Agreeableness. Oh, it's, yeah, agreeableness and disagreeableness. It tends to be that good leaders fit in at about the middle frame of agreeableness and disagreeableness because as a good leader, you can't just agree with everyone. You have to be able to disagree. So high in conscientiousness, sorry, moderate in conscientiousness, pretty high on extroversion, pretty high on openness to experience. Agreeableness, right about in the middle, and then the last one is neuroticism. I'm sure a lot of you would think, and rightfully so, that being emotionally stable is better for a leader than being emotionally unstable. So you want to have low neuroticism. I wanted to just touch on those things because that's what I know for sure from the literature of what personality traits and how they affect leaders. Now let's look at these other things, and we're going to look in more detail on all of them as we go. So, what does it mean to be self-confident? Self-confidence improves one's performance in a variety of tasks, including leadership. Self-confidence was among the first leadership traits researchers identified, still receives considerable attention as a major contributor of leadership effectiveness. Okay, let me model a professor who's not confident. Um, and again, I'm not trying to tease people who don't have confidence. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to draw out the need for you as a leader to be confident, and not just not be confident, but to understand the value of growing in confidence. And it means being sure of yourself, holding yourself as you are a valuable person. You matter, and your opinion matters. And what you have to say makes a difference. And if you believe that about yourself, if you have an internal locus of control, I can control my circumstance. I can control how I respond in this situation. I can control whether or not I talk or not talk. I don't let my emotions take over. What other people think about me doesn't matter. What matters most is that we do the right thing. This is what confident leaders do. And you wouldn't want to follow a leader who does not have confidence. You would, even if they're really smart, even if they have a position of power, but they're unsure of themselves, or they're unsure of what they don't know. But the thing is, obviously, in some situations, we're not going to be confident because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to do things. But a confident leader will tell you, I've never been in a situation like this before, and I'm not really sure what to do. But you better believe I'm going to give it my best. I'm going to try my hardest and I'm going to learn. Will you help me? Confidence, right? That's admitting your weakness, and there's strength in that. So I'm sitting on confidence because one of my biggest goals in this class is to help each one of you grow in confidence, because we're going to do these role plays, right? The role plays are going to be fun, and they're going to be, some of you are going to be nervous, and some of you are going to, be offended if somebody says, oh, well, you should have said this instead of this. This is an opportunity for us to practice. The best piano player in the world got good by doing what? Long time. Yes. And so when you see people who you're like, wow, I wish I was as confident as that person. But what I was trying to draw out is the difference between a person who seems to be fumbling a little bit on their words versus a person that's like, listen, I'm just going to eat this apple and I'm here. And, maybe that's not the greatest example, but he seems to be confident in himself. And he's exuding that level of confidence. If he was being a little less, he's being a bit arrogant. But if a person like that is continuously confident, it's you get the point. So let's talk about the antithesis, not the antithesis, but what can be considered a paradox of confidence is humility, but it's not. Humility is a wonderful phenomenon. If anybody who is humble that says they're humble probably isn't humble, which is an interesting concept in itself. But humility is defined as a self awareness, appreciating the strengths and contributions of others, and openness to ideas and feedback regarding one's performance. I hope that we can all strive to become more humble. And it means that we're willing to admit our faults, we're willing to acknowledge other people's effort, we're willing to understand that this world is a big place and there's a lot of things that I still need to learn. And I've gotten this far by hard work and dedication, but I still need to do things in my life and my career. And I need to listen to other people in order to achieve some of my goals. And doing that consistently is a form of humility. Part of humility is admitting that you do not know everything. We talked about that. Um, let's go to some other ones before we have to break. We got about 10 minutes, and I want to plug some of these other character traits that mean that they're character traits that tend to resonate within good leaders. There's no one formula for a good leader because leadership is contingent on circumstances and those other factors that we talked about, the team that you work with, the external and internal environment. But these things tend to be fairly consistent. For self-evaluations, a broad personality trait that captures bottom line self-assessment that is composed of self-esteem, locus of control, generalized self-efficacy, and emotional stability, which is a lot of it. So remember emotional stability, that's low on neuroticism. There you go. Boom. We're going to do an assignment in this class, part of your leadership portfolio, that is a self-assessment. And this is part of the reason why I'm trying to get you to listen to some content before you worry about the assignments. And the self-assessments are wonderful tools. There's a career assessment that I think MDC works as, that's pretty good. That would be one to use. And I gave you some examples in the syllabus and I gave you some examples under the assignment. But self assessments have really helped me understand some things about myself in order to be aware and acknowledge that these things exist. Let me see if I can find real quick an example of my self assessment. Okay, so I'll skip through these parts here, and I'm going to go down to what I would consider to be the most helpful part of this profile. I won't explain too much about it. I'm a mechanic for the wealth dynamics profile. This was a really cool process. I did it for myself, and I did it for my entire team. And so here's the best part. Here's the most important part about this profile. It's my weaknesses, my failures, my the worst roles on a team, the worst roles in life. And obviously, some of these I would disagree with, and some of them I work, but some of them I agree with. Let's look at this one. Weakness. These are part of my strengths and weaknesses. Often takes a long time to complete tasks. True. Gets caught up in details. Sometimes forgets about the team around them. I have an imaginative, creative deal. Sometimes I get lost in my thought process. Kind of true. Often inflexible and unwilling to change. Uh, yes and no, but that's good to know. I go through this process. I look at these things. I read this. I share this with other people. I say, "Do you think this about me?" I see some other people that may have similar traits, whatever that looks like. So you get the deal. I'm not going to share too much of the details, but that is a great tool to help me become a better leader. And so that's why self assessments are important to have, especially as a leader. I want to talk about this thing called self-efficacy and internal locus of control because it ties into confidence. I was curious if this terminology has been apparent at all in any of your other studies. So self-efficacy is, and I'll use an example when I define it. I am self-efficacious in my ability to talk about uh, power and leadership. I have talked about the different types of power and leadership over 100 times in my career, and I truly understand it. So I'm self-efficacious in my ability to communicate about leadership power. It's only because I've done it many times. The first time I had to go through all of these different types of power and leadership, I was not self-efficacious. So when practice, so let me use another example. I started CrossFit about 10 years ago, and I was told that I had to hold a bar over my head like this, and I had to do a squat. Let me tell you, I was not self-efficacious in my ability to do this movement. I felt very uncomfortable. My mobility was really bad. But after about 10 years, if you asked me to do an overhead squat, I, I can do it. Of course, overhead squat. How many you want me to do? Oh, what weight? No problem. Put the boot on, boom, do it. So this is being self-efficacious takes a level of practice, a level of confidence, and a level of control. So that's what being self-efficacious means. Self-efficacy in a particular task. So it takes a combination of practice, and that practice leads to confidence, which leads to efficacy. So it's a good one to have in your terminology bank. Okay, trustworthiness, pretty straightforward. Very difficult to work with a leader who's not trustworthy. I don't want to just breeze over it, even though we can talk about it for a while, um, because there's pillars of trust. Trust is there's three different stools. Consistency is important, integrity is important, and Um, accountability obviously is a part of that as well. But if you don't trust a leader, it's going to be very difficult to work with them continuously, and vice versa. If you're a follower and your leader doesn't trust you, you got a problem. Trust is really the foundation and the building block of relationships. Trust is closely related to transparency, in which organizational leadership is open rather than secretive about activities that affect the welfare. Yeah, we'll do one more slide and then we'll close it out for the night. One more, uh, two more traits. Authenticity. Would you guys consider me to be authentic as a professor? What are some ways because you sort of assessed my authenticity. What is it that makes me authentic? No, so what's funny about it is you don't really know why, you just know it when you see it. That's really what authenticity is. A person just they are what they are. You can be with a person and not feel as if you're trying to understand who this person is or what's the deal with this person. They just say it. They just are themselves. And sometimes authenticity can be a very valuable thing for a leader to have. You know it when you see it, but it's hard to define at times. That's the best way I can put it. But you just know that person's real. That person's good people, whatever that looks like. And I'm not always authentic, and being authentic isn't always a good thing. So it's contingent. Do I want to show up to the first day of class and be authentic about everything I struggled during that day? Like, maybe it was a really difficult day and I had a lot on my mind, and I showed up to class and the first thing I said is, "Oh, guys, I'm sorry, girls, I'm sorry. I'm really tired right now and I'm hungry. I haven't eaten all day. I'm just being authentic, being real with you all. That's and I'm embellishing, but that's not a good thing. You don't want a leader to overshare or talk too much about what the heck is going on in their life. Being overly authentic could actually count against leaders. Sometimes you want leaders to be real, but you want leaders to also exude a level of professionalism, and sometimes authenticity can count against it. But you need to have leaders that know how to be authentic when it matters. Hey, y'all, it's going to be a long night. I'm going to make sure we're gonna learn, we're gonna have fun, but we're gonna go until 8:10. I'm being real, being honest. Like it's going to be a tough night talking about leadership. We're going to be here the whole class. But that's sometimes you need to know that. Okay, last one, extroversion. This one. So if you here's my story about extroversion. This will be my last little story for the night, and then we'll disperse. So there's a person that wakes up in the morning, and maybe you can resonate with this, and they have a bag of coins next to their bed, and in the morning that bag of coins is completely full, and this is an introvert. Throughout the day, as they're going throughout their day with this bag of coins that they have next to their bed, they receive a text message in the morning from their uncle. And their uncle says, sorry, I can't make it to our planned dinner tonight. And you respond to the text message. You take a bag of coin, you give it. You're giving a coin out. You get to work. As soon as you get to work, two people, they say hello and they want to tell you about their weekend. You're like, okay, let me listen to this weekend. You're giving some coin out of your bag. You're taking your full bag of coin and you're giving it to them. There's a birthday party in the office that day. You love birthday parties and you love cakes. So you go to the office and you have to sing happy birthday and you have fun singing happy birthday because you're happy to be around other people. But boom, 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 your bag of coins is emptying during that birthday party. And then as you progress throughout your day, it's not a bad thing. You're giving out time, energy, effort, attention, all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, your bag of coins, it's completely empty. And you're done. You just want some time by yourself. You want to be alone and you're cool. You want to go to bed. So that's the introversion day with the bag of coins. The extroversion day with the bag of coins looks like this. Wake up in the morning, you're like, tough day, bag of coins empty. Your uncle sends you a text. You're like, oh, hey, unc, like, good morning. Nice to see you. Oh, no problem about dinner tonight. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? That sound like fun? Yeah, we'll reschedule for tomorrow. You're like looking for his response and you hear the ding. You're like, oh, my uncle responded. And so on the way to work, instead of just driving to work and listening to your podcast, you call your mom and you call your friend and you say, hey, it's a great day today. What do you think about doing today? Or you just say, hey, how you doing? I want to talk to you. And so as you talk to your friend or your mom, you're filling up. You get more coins. As soon as you walk in the office, you see some friends. You're like, "Hey, what's up?" You give them daps. You say hello. You instead of them telling you about their weekend, you tell them about your weekend. And you ask, "How does your weekend go?" And so then when you get to your desk and 2.5 hours go by and you're bored out of your mind because you're working on your computer all by yourself, and then you realize, oh, it's Jenny's birthday, and you're the first one in there, and you're galvanizing people around the birthday party, and you're bringing them in. Come on, remember it's Jenny's birthday. We got cake and you're the one who leads the birthday chant. You're like, okay, ready, birthday, on three, sing happy birthday, 1, 2, 3, and your coin bag is just filling up. So at the end of the day, your bag, because you've interacted with a lot of people, is filled with coins. So that's the difference between it's an embellished difference, but tends to be that introverts fill up on their energy when they're with less people, like maybe one-on-one conversation, one-on-two conversation, a good level of conversation, and the right type of people can help fill them up on energy. Too many people, too many circumstances, too many interruptions. Introverts struggle with that. They need time to recharge. Extroverts, they love it all. They want to go to parties. They love people. They're like, oh, that dude's weird. He's not talking to me. That's fine with me. I don't mind. I'm gonna go talk to this other person that'll talk to me. Extroverts are more, they get energy from other people, being around other people, being in different circumstances. It fills them up. Okay, so that's the difference between introverts and extroverts. It tends to be better for a leader to have a higher propensity for extroversion. Let's say this. Okay, I'm 1 minute over. It's a scale, right? So it's not like I'm extroverted or I'm introverted. It's a scale of 1 to 10, and you could fit on that scale somewhere in the middle, somewhere a little bit more towards introversion, or you can fit a little bit halfway to extroversion. It's not I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. That is a fallacy. It's not true. It's a scale. So don't ever bucket yourself as an extrovert or introvert. You have a higher propensity towards introversion, or you have a higher propensity towards extroversion. It's one or the other. Okay, thank you. I can't see your faces. Let me stop sharing my screen. Let's take a night. Thank you for bearing with me tonight. I know it's a lot of talking. I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday night. Good luck with your first assignment.